You might not think of Germany when you think of whiskey producers, but this little gem came from a small family farm distillery, was aged in a really unusual cask, and if you're ever traveling from Germany to Australia, I need you to get me a bottle. This is on loan and I might struggle to give it back. Hey there, I'm Nath Martyn, the Whiskey Scribe. Taste is subjective, whiskey is diverse, and this channel is about understanding it well enough to enjoy it on your own terms. Now, I'm part of a whiskey tasting club that meets monthly to enjoy a range of whiskies. These days my role in the club is to select and present the lineup of whiskies, but members will often also bring along a bottle that they want to share, because whiskey is better shared with people who enjoy it as much as you. So this was brought back by one of our members who just came back from a holiday in Germany, and everyone in the club really enjoyed it. It had like a bit of a unique flavor profile compared to what we're used to. And this member was generous enough to loan me the bottle so that I could do this review here. Now don't worry, Mark, I'm gonna give this back, probably, maybe. We'll see how we go after I taste it again. Now initially I wasn't able to find too much information about this. Everything on the bottle is written in German. I was able to find out that it's from a family-run farm distillery called Brennerei, located in Mittelrheinbach, not far from Nuremberg. And sorry for my pronunciation, I don't speak German. The only thing I can say in German is Ich bin nicht ein Roboter. They're a working farm with orchards where they grow fruit to make their spirits and liqueurs, but then they also make whiskey. And to find out a little bit more information about the whiskey, I reached out to the distillery just by email to see if I could get a little bit more information, and I received a really warm response from Reinhold Singer. So they were happy to hear that we enjoyed the whiskey neat, as that's how it's intended to be enjoyed. Good start. They source their grains from local farmers in the region, both the barley and the wheat, because working with regional partners is really important to them. Another great sign. They don't chill filter because they want to preserve as much of the natural character, mouthfeel and flavor as possible. I love these guys. Their production philosophy is focused on craftsmanship and regional authenticity, all very hands-on with strong attention to detail. They work in small batches, placing emphasis on letting the grain and the cask influence speak for themselves. They said their goal is to reflect the origin of the product and create a whiskey that is both honest and characterful. So I love it when a distillery has a really great ethos and intent behind making the whiskey. It usually creates a really good foundation for making a great whiskey. So with that in mind, this is a blended whiskey made from local German malted barley and wheat, aged 3 years in oak. It's finished for 6 months in chestnut barrels, non-chill filtered, no color added. Now when it comes to colour, I've done a whole video on E150A. It's a colouring that some distillers do add to whiskey, and although in Scotland they don't actually have to disclose if they add that to whiskey, which I hate, in Germany it's law that if you add E150A colour to a whiskey, you have to display mit Farbstoff on the bottle, which means colour added. And this one doesn't have colour added, so it doesn't have that. But because it's law, Scottish whiskies that have been imported into Germany do have to display mit Farbstoff on their bottle if they've added colour. Even if the original bottling doesn't state it, if it's had colour added, by law, they have to disclose it in Germany. So initially, it's a nice oily whiskey, and there's a really nice underlying, it's like a browny, reddy sort of colour. You know what, you could almost even call it chestnut. Funnily enough, it's been aged in chestnut barrels. But on the nose, it has a beautiful nose. So there's this sweetness that comes across that at the first sniff you almost think it comes across like sherry, but you then start to realize it's sort of more like a kind of like almost like a cherry wood sort of thing happening. It's like caramelized fruit. And there's a bit of a freshness to it that comes across a little bit like green tobacco leaves. It's sweet but somewhat rustic. So you get, like I said, that little bit of tobacco. It's like a woody sort of sweetness. And then there's even almost a bit like wood oil or freshly oiled leather. I have to go in. Prost. It's interesting that this has got like it's sort of like a contrast between the textures and the flavor notes. So the general mouthfeel, it's soft and a little bit dry. It sort of coats the whole mouth. There's some warmth happening at the back of the palate, but the flavor notes are sort of almost oily in nature. So I get that sort of caramelized fruit sweetness. There's a little bit of like dark, like that oily note that you get in dark chocolate, you know, that little bit of lingering oily coating in the back of your mouth. There's a faint woody note, but it doesn't come across the way you usually get a wood note in whiskey. So usually with a whiskey, if I'm getting sort of a woody note, it comes across kind of oaky or maybe cedar. Whereas with this one, it is that sweeter chestnutty sort of note. The chestnut really does dominate. Yeah, and then the finish, I'd call it a medium finish. It hangs around a little bit. The warmth, I think the warmth lingers a little bit longer than the rest of the palate. So most of what you're getting on the palate sort of sticks around for a little bit, but you get this warmth that sort of goes to the back of your mouth, and then sort of it goes down the throat and sticks around on your chest, which is beautiful. There's a sweetness that sticks around for quite a while, like very faintly, but most of the flavors sort of dissipate around that medium finish sort of mark, but it still does linger for a while. I'd say a strong medium finish. You could call it a light long finish, if that makes sense. Yeah, that sweet, woody, leathery sort of flavor and aroma. This is a beautiful whiskey. So I'd say this whiskey is for somebody who perhaps likes a little bit of those sweet sort of flavors, but doesn't necessarily like the almost candied sweetness of a sherry bomb. So it's sweet, but it carries across with some more drier, rustic sort of flavor notes. So while your classic sherry bomb will be very like, you know, fruit cake and, you know, caramelized fruit, this is like a little bit on the drier end of caramelized fruit, but it's sort of carried across more so with woody sort of notes, bit of leather, a faint little bit of wood spice, but it's just really nicely well rounded. It's sweet, but it's not too sweet, which I think is fantastic. It's so unique. I'd love to try some other chestnut aged whiskies to compare it, because I don't know if these flavor notes are specifically from the distillery and the grains they're using and how they're aging, or if it is more so from that 6 months of finish in the chestnut cask. With that in mind, I had to look it up because I haven't actually had anything aged in chestnut before. So chestnut is more porous than oak, so it accelerates whiskey maturation because you've got a lot more of that infusion into the wood. It produces a deeper, more reddish color compared to oak, which yes, we definitely saw in this one. The flavors are considered robust, rustic, with notes of honey, dark chocolate, caramel, dried fruits, and intense wood spice. I'd say mostly yes to all of that. I wouldn't say intense wood spice on this one because I thought it was actually quite nice and soft and palatable. It wasn't too over the top with that spiciness. Chestnut has higher tannin levels than oak, contributing to firmer, sometimes drier and more structured mouthfeel. I would say yes, I did get a drier, more structured mouthfeel. Yeah, especially considering wheated whiskies usually sort of give it a little bit more of like a softer, creamier sort of texture, whereas this one, it is a little bit softer than a single malt, but it still has a little bit of that texture to it. So that might be coming from that chestnut cask. And because of all these factors, chestnut is usually just used for finishing with whiskey, because a whiskey aged entirely in chestnut barrels would be, like Richard Patterson, a little too much.
I'll kill you. And you're slowing on the floor. I don't know you. Lovely lady, everything about you, fantastic. I've had 3 women already collapse and faint in front of me. I'm in a bad mood, I'm hot, I'm fiery, I'm aggressive. You put it in the glass, put it on the floor. So you just come back again, that's it, that's better. And just even...
So now that I've revisited this, I don't want to give this back, but it's okay, Mark. I'll give it back. Thank you for the loan. Now with our Whiskey Club, we always encourage our members, if they're traveling, to try and pick up local whiskies, because you never know when you're going to come across a little gem like this from a small family-run distillery on the other side of the world. It never would have made it to Australia commercially, and we never would have had a chance to try it. And there are so many great distilleries around the world. You would actually be surprised how many countries that you're not aware of are actually making whiskey at a commercial level. And so that's why the next series of videos I'm going to be doing, I'm digging down into all the countries in the world, every single one that produces a commercial grade whiskey to some extent. And I'm surprised at how many countries there are that are doing this. So if you want to catch that video series, if you want to see every country in the world that makes whiskey, hit the subscribe button, because that's going to be the next 4 or 5 videos. I'm having to break it down into Europe, Asia, the Americas, even Africa. So don't miss that. But no matter where it's from, enjoy what's in your glass and slange, or prost. Nice. Do I have to give it back, Mark?